Matthew 13:13. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. So in terms of understanding the Bible, this is an incredibly important thing we're hearing from God in the flesh here. The point of speaking in parables is not to make it so what's being said is easier to understand. Instead, it's to make it harder to understand, so that hearing, you might not actually hear the point being made. Now, we can't just understand this as a test to basically weed out the people who aren't really serious about learning what the Bible says. And certainly there are lots of people out there who reject Christianity because they are willfully choosing not to understand what's being said. But the flip side to that is once you actually do understand what's being said, you feel so much more fulfilled because you actually had to put in the effort yourself to understand and to pray about it and to connect to God to get some understanding of his wisdom. And the Bible's a lot more credible when you understand the whole thing was written in this way. It's not just directly saying, here is what's happening and here is the obvious point of what's happening. If the sheep in Genesis that is killed in Isaac's place was just directly identified as a prefiguration of Jesus, that wouldn't be particularly meaningful, because then we could just say that somebody was motivated to fulfill the prophecy themselves because they knew it was a direct prophecy that was made. However, if the Bible is instead filled with lots of stories that have much deeper meanings, and then we look at those deeper meanings and we see it's all pointing to Jesus, that becomes quite difficult to explain from a naturalistic perspective. In order to believe that, you'd have to believe there were a whole load of people who were not only able to tell a coherent story with a complete theological progression across this book written over centuries by dozens of authors, but also that they were able to do this while identifying all of the deeper meanings of what came before. And what's even more impressive is that we know that these deep meanings aren't just something you can manufacture yourself by reinterpretation, because there have been many other religions like Islam, like Mormonism, like Jehovah's Witnesses, that have all tried to come up with their own readings of this text, and they just blatantly don't fit. So the fact that God speaks to us in parables where stories have deeper meanings might require a bit more effort from you, but it's ultimately much more rewarding in that it gives you a much greater assurance that this book is actually telling the truth.